Remember in the last lesson how we talked about all of the jobs that are involved with the consumption of goods and services? In addition to all of those people, think of all of the resources we use to create things. And remember all of the transportation that's involved. When we consume goods, let's say from China, the transportation of those goods halfway around the world makes a big impact on the environment. Living in Alberta, we're keenly aware of the need to find a balance between economic growth and the environment. While the consumption of natural resources like oil and gas are vital to our economy, Albertans are also concerned with issues like pollution and climate change. Citizens can demonstrate their opinion on how to balance these issues in a variety of ways. They could join lobby groups, protest, they could vote for the political party whose economic party platform best fits with their ideology. And of course, don't forget dollar voting that we talked about in the previous video. One example of a controversial environmental issue is the Kyoto Protocol. This was an international agreement to reduce the use of greenhouse gases to minimize the impact on climate change. When the Liberal government of Canada was in power, they signed Canada onto the Kyoto Accord. Many Canadians supported this idea, as it not only could help the environment, but also contributed to Canada's reputation as being willing to cooperate with others to find solutions to international problems. But as time passed, many other Canadians expressed their concern that these new international rules would bring too much harm to the Canadian economy, because the Kyoto initiatives cost money and encourage people to buy less of the resources we're trying to sell. So when the Conservative government was elected, Stephen Harper pulled Canada out of the agreement. While the Conservative government says they're concerned about the environment, their right-wing ideology puts the economy first. Of course, consumers can take action without involving the government directly, by purchasing more fuel-efficient cars or using public transportation, or having a reusable water bottle, or making the decision just to not consume as many goods. We can minimize the impact we have on the environment. Even something as simple as eating less hamburgers. Did you know that thousands of hectares of the Amazon rainforest are being cut down in order to create grazing land for cattle? This reduces the biodiversity of the region. Many scientists fear that we could be losing vital plants and animals. What if the cure for cancer is there, and we're throwing it away in exchange for a yummy treat? We live in a disposable society, which means many of our products are designed to be thrown away after use, often only once. That, of course, has a major impact not only on the harvesting of resources, but our landfills. There's two terms that relate to this disposable society. Planned obsolescence is when producers design products to only be useful for a short time. They'll try and make things last for as short a period as possible without making consumers lose faith in their product. That way, when it breaks or becomes obsolete or no longer useful, you're going to need to buy a new one. Can you think of something around your house that just didn't seem to last as long as you thought it should? My first microwave lasted like 8 years. The next one only lasted a couple years. And when it broke, I took it to the repair shop and the repairman said it's not worth fixing. It's a cheapo microwave and his labor cost would be more than just buying a new one. So just throw it out. The second term is perceived obsolescence, which is when producers try to convince you that a product isn't good anymore, even though it still works perfectly fine, in order to get you to buy more. They do this by releasing and advertising new versions of their product that are only slightly different, often in appearance only, so that you feel like what you have isn't as good as the newest version. Think about our clothes. Do you realize that the majority of the people in the world have only a few changes of clothing? How many pairs of jeans and t-shirts do you own? And why? Would you be willing to wear the hand-me-downs of a distant cousin? Why not? Did somebody tell you that those perfectly good clothes were obsolete? So why should we care about the environment? Well, it affects everybody. Air quality impacts people with asthma or other breathing disorders. Pollution is impacting different plant and animal species, like the honeybees that we need to pollinate many of the foods we love to eat. Global warming has led to things like changing weather patterns that can destroy crops through drought or flooding. It also impacts ecosystems, as we've seen with the spread of the pine beetle, which has destroyed millions of acres of forest, taking away the money that could be made harvesting those trees on top of the damage to our beautiful landscape. Don't forget, tourism is a multi-million-dollar industry, but even tourism can have an impact as people are hiking and camping or building condos that affects the ecosystem. Another issue is the impact development has on Aboriginal groups. First Nations groups have a traditional connection to the land, and the development of resources can impact their way of life. For example, in the Fort McMurray region, there's the Fort McKay First Nation, who has found that the extraction of bitumen in the oil sands region is impacting their people. Studies have found that their water is contaminated and children have unusually high levels of lead in their system. While the oil companies do try to minimize the impact on the environment, the fact of the matter is this is very toxic stuff they're working with. Remember when 1,600 ducks died just because they landed on one of the tailings ponds? This is why the government and citizens need to be concerned with what we're consuming. The harvesting and production of natural resources both helps us and can hurt us if we're not careful. Land use refers to our interaction with the environment. Here in Alberta, we interact with nature through agriculture, forestry, through oil and gas industries, and spreading urbanization. Our cities are growing. We can't just turn our backs on this, but we can have sustainable development, which allows us to use resources today to contribute to the economy while also thinking about future generations, making sure our economic development can be sustained. A great example of Alberta taking this into consideration is the wildlife corridor in Banff. Alberta has spent millions of dollars building fences along the highway to protect wildlife from getting hit by all of the traffic, and land bridges over the highway to allow the animals to migrate in an attempt to protect the biodiversity. Some people may complain that it used to be a lot more fun to drive to Banff in the 1970s when you could see all of the bears and the bighorn sheep along the side of the road and maybe even pull over and feed them a few cheesies. But today we recognize that we must respect and protect what makes Banff so great, nature. So while the province is still able to make millions of dollars from the consumers who spend money in the parks, we can use some of that money to also protect the ecosystem and have sustainable development. So now think about your ideology. What do you put first, the environment or the economy? If you believe we can work to protect the environment, but you're going to have money to do that, so businesses should come first, you're more right-wing. You probably wouldn't consider the environmental impact when you're making purchases. If you're more left-wing, you're willing to sacrifice some of your comforts to be more environmentally friendly. So you would be willing to pay more for goods and services that do more to consider how to protect the environment for everyone to enjoy. In the end, whatever our opinions are about the environment and sustainable development, there are many people who are impacted by our consumer decisions.